Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this evening. Thank you for this opportunity to gather together and study your word. I pray that we will make the most of it and to help us focus our minds and, help me not to get in the way of what you have to say tonight. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Okay, so we are going to be in Judges again. We're going to finish up chapter 6 and go through chapter 7. So we're going to be in part 2 of our three-week Gideon saga. What happened to Gideon last week? Who is he? What's he doing? Where do we leave him? Yeah,
Did he make that one Bible?
different Gideon, but not
I know
wrong.
what you're talking about. That started in the town I live in.
Yeah, so Kessa says he was making some unusual life choices. That's a reference to him threshing wheat inside of a wine press. Normally, you thresh wheat on a hilltop, and he was doing it in a hole in the ground, which is what a wine press would be. Mrs. Wise-Rat is also correct. God encountered him in the wine press and told him to go. Called him a. What did he call him? How did the angel of the Lord address Gideon? Yeah, mighty man of valor is the KJV term. Means mighty warrior. Kind of equivalent of like what we'd think of a special forces guy. It's like the next step up of soldier in the Old Testament. So, the angel of the Lord walks up to him and addresses him as a mighty man of valor, a mighty warrior. And he's in there hiding in the wine press trying to thresh some wheat. So not exactly what we would think of as a mighty warrior, but the angel of the Lord and Gideon have a conversation. Gideon eventually realizes that he is speaking to the angel of the Lord, and the angel of the Lord gives him some commands, and that's what Mrs. Wise-Rat is referencing. He tore down some altars. He tells him to go tear down the altars of Baal and Ashtoreth. Now that's a problem because those altars are owned by his dad. His dad is apparently a village leader, so that would have been a part of this family's authority. So Gideon goes and does it with 10 guys who were notably not part of the command. But he goes and does it, right? That's something. The villagers come out and they start calling for Gideon's head. And what does Gideon's dad tell them? Yeah. Baal can fend for himself. Yeah. Why are you guys defending Baal? Let him deal with this if Baal's upset about my son tearing down the altars, which is not what we'd expect Gideon's dad to say. But it winds up being okay for Gideon. So that's where we left Gideon last week. Okay, positive story. That's good. Yay for that. Okay, let's see what happens this week. So, can I have a volunteer to read verses 33 through 40? And I gave the wrong link. I will go back and get a different link. One might even say a better link. All right, correct link is now in the channel. All right, if you want to go for it, Kessa.
33 to 40.
Yes.
Now all the Midianites and the Amalekites and the people of the east came together, and they crossed the Jordan and encamped in the valley of Jezreel. But the Spirit of the Lord clothed Gideon, and he sounded the trumpet, and the Abiezrites were called out to follow him. And he sent messengers throughout all Manasseh, and they too were called out to follow him. And he sent messengers to Asher, Zebulun, and Naphtali, and they went up to meet them. Then Gideon said to God, "If you will save Israel by my hand, as you have said, behold, I am laying a fleece of wool on the threshing floor. If there is dew on the fleece alone, and it is dry on all the ground, then I shall know that you will save Israel by my hand, as you have said." And it was so. When he rose early next morning and squeezed the fleece, he wrung enough dew from the fleece to fill a bowl of water. Then Gideon said to God, "Let not your anger burn against me. Let me speak just once more. Please let me test just once more with the fleece. Please let it be dry on the fleece only, and on all the ground let there be dew." And God did so that night. It was dry on the fleece only, and on all the ground there was dew.
Thank you. Okay, so we've got kind of the story that's talked about all the time in churches about Gideon at the end there. Before we get there, let's take a look at the scene in verses 33 through 35. So the Midianites and Amalekites and the people of the east came together. They cross over the Jordan River, and they camp in the valley of Jezreel. Now, where is that? If somebody says in the Middle East, I'm going to ban people. Yes, it is. Okay, guess is close. It's near Jezreel. Yep. Okay, good. I'm trying to find. I actually may have a picture of this somewhere. I should have looked for this earlier. Yes, Winged, that is correct. Now, why is it a popular location by military standards?
Well, we did kind of talk about it in recent weeks. Maybe not by that name, though.
I did listen to that study.
Yeah. Yeah. Hint, hint. If you look at that map, guess what's in the top center of it?
Is that Mount Mora?
Nope.
Endor?
Higher up.
Oh, Mount Tabor.
Yes.
Yes.
Top center.
Mm-hmm. And where have we talked about Mount Tabor before? Yes. Yep. That Mount Tabor was where the Israelites encamped under Deborah and Barak before facing off with Sisera's army. So the valley of Jezreel is actually the far eastern end of the Kishon Valley.
Yeah, super popular invasion route. Okay, so it's kind of to the west of Galilee. It is the main route that kind of bisects the country. In fact, it's a major route if you're landing supplies nearby to take farther east. The Romans used it all the time. I've been there. Really flat land. Mora, Mora and Tabor are really like the two hills that are kind of overlooking it. Other than the cliffs on either side. So they are strategically important positions to hold. Interestingly, we've talked about one previously, and we'll talk about another this week. But it makes sense why the Israelites would station themselves in one of those two if you have a force moving through the Jezreel Valley, because the force is going to have to deal with you before it passes through there. The Romans knew this. The Romans had stations and garrisons here. In fact, if you look at the ruins of kind of ancient civilizations, this is an area where you'll see lots of other influences, Gentile influences, especially because lots of people would travel through there. It was a big trade route. People would land kind of in that bay you can see just south of Echo on that second image there. And they take supplies through this valley farther east into Babylon and Persia and other places like that. So flat area makes sense why the army would be moving through here, because they're crossing the Jordan, which is that squiggly line you can see coming off of Galilee, and moving west into the heartland. So this makes a lot of sense. This is historically accurate here. What kind of force are we dealing with here? How many people groups? For the enemies, the bad guys. Yeah. A large force of multiple countries, right? Midianites, Amalekites, and people of the east. So we've got 3 there. Coalition force. In the ancient world, coalition forces, the reason why they do coalition forces during this time period is because lots of men are good. The way you'd kill the enemy is you'd all line up, you kind of run out against each other, and really whoever could turn the enemy's flank, which is get around the side of the enemy or the back of the enemy, would usually win a battle. So you'd want lots of guys, and you'd line up as far as you could get to the sides, because you don't want the enemy getting around your sides. Yeah, pretty much. Especially in this time period. Now, there's other ways to do it. One of the reasons why Alexander the Great steamrolled some of the armies in this area later is because he found some ways to counter that without having as many guys. But generally, that was the preferred strategy, almost like a big shoving match. And if you get around the side of the enemy, you'd win. So you want a lot of guys, and one of the ways you go to a lot of guys, if you only have a limited amount of guys, go to the town next to you and be like, "Hey, we're gonna go beat up on the Israelites and take their bread again. Y'all want to come?" And so you'd get different people groups and different cultures all kind of in this big coalition to go beat up on the weak neighbor, right? That's Israel in this sense. So that's why you're having multiple guys. Now, there's a downside to having a coalition in this time period, and we'll see that as this kind of doesn't go so well for the coalition. But that's the upside. It is on a sheer daylight flat battle, and this is a very flat terrain they're going to be fighting in. Then you're going to really have an advantage. So Gideon sees this. He sees them moving into the area, knows he has to shut this down. So he calls out people from neighboring tribes. So he has messengers all through Manasseh to Asher, Zebulun, Naphtali, and these people come out to meet him. So Gideon, the forces are showing up. Okay, they're kind of rolling into the Israelite camp, and Gideon is going, "Okay, man, I sure hope that I'm doing the right thing here." So he puts out a test. What is the test? That's correct, Kessa, by the way. You got paid by plunder. So all the loot that you took off the bodies and any slaves that you took. That's what you got paid by. Yeah, wing and scribe. Let's defy nature. Exactly. So some people see this as kind of like a random roll the dice thing. This is very much not that. This is Gideon saying to God, "I want to know that you're more powerful than nature and not a force of nature." Why is that important? What do we know about the context that Gideon is using here as to why this might be a relevant test? Or what does this mean within the context of the times that he's in? So, better question. Go ahead, Cass.
Well, he just made Baal and Asherah really angry.
Yeah. So, most gods of this region at the time were forces of nature. Wind, rain, storms, um, fertility, etc., right?
By
Forces of
these
nature.
powers combined. Sorry.
They're the different infinity stones, right? I mean, like they're individual forces of nature. And what Gideon wants to know is, hey, are you a force of nature or are you more powerful than nature? Can you defy nature, right? So this is Gideon's way of confirming that, yeah, God is more powerful than these other gods. So, what he does is he lays out a fleece and asks God to have the fleece kind of defy the ambient conditions. So normally, if you guys have ever been camping, and it's a wet night, you wake up in the morning, everything is soaked, right? Because you get this dew on the ground, the condensation, right? This is why anything you don't want soaked, you bring into the camp, into the tent with you, and preferably put it inside some sort of bag, right? Um, when I went camping this last fall, one of my friends did not do this, and he left his clothes out, so all his clothes were soaked in the morning. And I got up, and one of his tent mates was like, "Yeah, he's not in a good place right now." And I'm like, "Are we talking like physically or emotionally?" They're like, "Yeah." So yeah, that's if it's a wet, cold night. Everything's going to be wet and cold in the morning, right? What Gideon does with these two tests is he asks God to reverse it. So if it's gonna be dew on the grass all around, it's gonna be a wet, cold night. He wants the fleece to be bone dry, and vice versa. Why is so that's unusual for a couple reasons. You know, obviously we know that from camping that's what happens, but also fleece absorbs water, right? It's a natural wicking thing. So it's going to suck in any moisture around it. So for sure, there's no way this is going to be an accident. This is God's work if this inverts, which is what it does here. And a lot of people kind of come after Gideon about this, and say, "Well, this is weak faith." I don't think it really is. I mean, if I'm Gideon and everybody else around me is worshiping idols, right? We've just dealt with that. His own family is worshiping idols, and the army is about to go up against his worshiping idols. I want to have some assurances that God, who says he's going to help me, is more powerful than these other gods, right? Um, Now, what I would caution us against is people who say, "Yes, so this is a good way of making decisions." You let God arbitrarily determine something about the circumstance, and that's how you can make decisions as to if you should take a job or not, if you should marry somebody or not. And that is a bad way of looking at things, okay? Because that's not what Gideon is doing here, right? Gideon does not have James. Gideon does not have the New Testament. He does not have the Bible like we do, and we're not in the same context that he is. Can can we ask God to strengthen our faith and to reassure us? Absolutely. But I think that we don't want to take this as guidance for us. But at the same time, I don't think we should go to the other extreme and judge Gideon for doing this either, because again, he's in a pagan context, right? This is before they have the written word of God. This is before, this is a time where even his own countrymen aren't following God. So yeah, I mean, this is understandable for him. Yeah, no, you guys are right. He might not even have access to a prophet. There's a distinct difference between verifying your faith and waiting on God to make every decision for you. And we'll see some of that in the next chapter, actually. Anything else on that, guys? Anything else we should take away from that, or any comments you have? All right. Okay. So let's move on to Judges 7 and see how this plays out. Can I have a volunteer to read verses 1 through 8 of Judges 7? Go for it, wing it.
All right, what were the verses again?
1 through 8.
Verse 7? Verse 8, okay. Then Jerubbaal, that is Gideon, and all the people who were with him rose early and encamped beside the spring of Harod. And the camp of Midian was north of them by the hill of Moreh in the valley. The Lord said to Gideon, "The people with you are too many for me to give the Midianites into their hand, lest Israel boast over me, saying, 'My own hand has saved me.' Now therefore proclaim in the ears of the people, saying, 'Whoever is fearful and trembling, let him return home and hurry away from Mount Gilead.' Then 22,000 of the people returned, and 10,000 remained. And the Lord said to Gideon, 'The people are still too many. Take them down to the water, and I will test them for you there. And anyone of whom I say to you, this one shall go with you, shall go with you. And anyone of whom I say to you, this one shall not go with you, shall not go.' So he brought the people down to the water. And the Lord said to Gideon, 'Everyone who laps the water with his tongue, as a dog laps, you shall set by himself. Likewise, everyone who kneels down to drink.' And the number of those who lapped, putting their hands to their mouths, was 300 men. But all the rest of the people knelt down to drink water. And the Lord said to Gideon, 'With the 300 men who lapped, I will save you and give the Midianites into your hand. And let all the others go every man to his home.' So the people took provisions in their hands and their trumpets. And he sent all the rest of Israel, every man to his tent, but retained the 300 men. And the camp of Midian was below him in the valley."
Thank you. Okay. So, the people show up, and they're already outnumbered. Roughly 32,000 of them. They see the camp of Midian, and where's the camp of Midian?
North.
Yes, north by a hill, right? Makes sense. If I'm these guys, and I come into the area, and I need to fortify an area to use as a base in this valley region, I'm going to pick one of the two hills in the area, because that gives me good sight lines and a good position to fall back onto. It's a fortified position, right? So they pick one of the two hills to set up as a camp. What's great about that is the Israelites, when they're kind of rallying at this brook, they can see who's there and kind of get the there it is. There it is. They have the high ground. Anakin would not be happy about this right now. Okay, the Israelites come in, they can kind of see this, and I kind of get the impression that the people are kind of getting nervous. They're like, when I answered this invite, I didn't know it was going to be this kind of party, right? So God speaks to Gideon, and God basically says, "We have a problem. What's the problem?"
Yes, there's too many men, so they will think they did it without God's help.
Exactly. Too many guys. Now, from what we just talked about regarding ancient battle strategies, too many guys is not normally a problem from a military perspective, right? But for what God's trying to accomplish, which is to help these people learn about humility and learn not to follow idols and things like that, this is a problem. Because they could think that they're going to do this by themselves. So we start cutting back on the forces, and we cut back 2 ways. First way is pretty simple. What's the first way we cut back on the forces?
Send the cowards home.
Yeah. Yeah, anybody who's not willing to party, head on out. And how many people headed out? What percentage of the force?
Enough to make me make a funny voice about it.
Yeah, 2/3 of the force head out, okay? 2/3 of the people are like, yep, I don't want no part of that. Peace out. Oh, yeah. God looks at the force and goes, still too many. Which is funny because we're down to now 1/3 of a force that's already significantly outnumbered. And what's the second method that we use to cut back on forces?
How they drink water.
Yeah. So the ones who get cut are the ones who just kind of bend down, stuff their face in the stream, and drink up. The ones that stay are the ones that kind of cup the water up in their hands and drink it out of their hands. Now, is there any significance to how they're drinking? Does that matter? Basically, what I'm asking is this: are they being cut because God arbitrarily wants fewer guys, or are they being cut because the guys who stick their faces in the water are going to be at a tactical disadvantage when it comes to fighting? There's tons of debate about this in the commentaries. What do you guys think?
God wants less soldiers.
That's the last I catch this comment. Yeah. So Winged is correct. He spots the trick question. The answer is yes. I was reading through this and I'm like, I was reading the commentary debate. I'm like, this is dumb. This is dumb. This doesn't have to be a dichotomy, right? If we're gonna have fewer guys, there's no reason not to have fewer guys who are gonna be good at fighting, right? Because they're still gonna have to do fighting. But yes, the answer is God does want to cut back on the forces so that Israel can be humbled. But at the same time, there is an advantage to these guys who are being more alert, because these guys they are within sight of the bad guys, right? Of a significant superior force, and most of these guys just walk up to the stream, stick their faces in, put their butts in the air as they're drinking, and just drink up. And it's like, okay, this ain't good. This is not professional. So the guys who stay are both committed, right? They have the heart, and they have the tactics, right? They have the abilities for this. So yeah, it's not either or, it's a both and. It's interesting. Yeah. It's interesting. I almost never hear people in the church say that there is a tactical element to this, but almost every Jew that I've spoken to about this, whether they be just like laymen or rabbis, all say, "Oh yeah, for sure, there was a tactical element to this." So I do think that they're probably closer to the original meaning of some of these texts than we are sometimes. So I think that there's definitely an element of that. But yeah. Midianites, yeah. Ooh boy. Okay, so we're down to now 300 guys. Everybody else he sends back to their tents. He keeps 300 guys here. And the camp of Midian was in the valley, below him in the valley. So he's at kind of one edge of the valley, is looking across the valley, sees the camp of Midian. Okay. Now he knows he has to go up to fight these guys, or go to fight these guys. With 300 guys, so he's dramatically outnumbered. What do you think Gideon's thinking at this point? Where do you think he's at emotionally, mentally, spiritually? What place is he in, to borrow the? Yeah. Thank you, fish sticks. And Kessa. That's pretty close, I think. Yeah, he's probably freaking out, right? Okay, so let's see what happens next. So I'll can I volunteer to read verses 9 through 14?
No, I just realized Joe's not here. He's normally volunteering to do this. I'll do it again.
Go for it.
To what verse? 19?
9 through 14?
9 through 14.
Yep, 14.
I was listening. Okay. That same night, the Lord said to him, Arise, go down against the camp, for I have given it into your hand. But if you are afraid to go down to the camp with Purah, your servant. It's a great name. And you shall hear what they say, and afterward your hands shall be strengthened to go down against the camp. Then he went down with Purah, his servant, to the outposts of the armed men who were in the camp. And the Midianites and the Amalekites and all the people of the east lay along the valley like locusts in abundance, and their camels were without number, as the sand that is on the seashore in abundance. When Gideon came, behold, a man was telling a dream to his comrade. And he said, Behold, I dreamed a dream. And behold, a cake of barley bread tumbled into the camp of Midian, and came to the tent, and struck it so that it fell, and it turned upside down so that the tent lay flat. And his comrade answered, This is no other than the sword of Gideon, the son of Joash, a man of Israel. God has given into his hand Midian and all the camp.
Thank you. Okay. What in the world is happening here? Go ahead, Cass.
There is an interpreter of dreams with the army of the Midianites.
Yeah, there is. So God chooses to encourage Gideon, but he chooses to do it in a very strange way, right? So one of the commentators I was reading points out, normally we get encouragement from like people in the community of God. Instead, God knows that Gideon is probably freaking out internally, right? He's supposed to go up against this giant army that's been steamrolling Israel for the last 8 years with 300 guys, right? So God decides to encourage Gideon. He does so by sending him down to the camp, which takes some courage. That's not really the place you want to go if you're Gideon right now. But when he goes there, he finds these two guys having a dream. The dreams are often seen as signs and prophecies in the ancient Near East at the time. So the guy tells his friend, I've got this dream, right? I've got this cake of barley bread, tumbles into our camp, comes down to a tent, crushes the tent flips over and falls apart. And the other guy very specifically goes, that's the sword of Gideon, the son of Joash, a man of Israel, and we're going to die because of him. Now, this is obviously not a coincidence, right? This is not something that you would expect somebody in this camp to say. So this is God, through his providence, providing this encouragement to Gideon. A couple interesting things about this. Israel is portrayed as a cake of barley bread. Why is that? Yeah, it's not exactly like the most flattering thing for my enemies to be like seeing me portrayed in a dream of, right? I prefer to be, like a rock or a freaking lion, maybe a bird of prey. No, here comes.
I just take sourdough at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. Kess is right. Is there because this is what they're here for, right? They're here for food. This is the annual go sack Israel, take their food thing. Israel is basically food for Midian, both literally and figuratively. But here is the food coming and just like destroying their camp, which is kind of interesting. Also interesting is that these guys call out Gideon by name, along with his father. Again, I don't think Gideon was as unknown as Gideon said he was. But still, it's quite something for these guys to say, hey, Gideon's going to come and wreck us, right? That shows that they're afraid of him, which has got to be encouraging for Gideon. Because here's Gideon looking at these guys, and what's great about this story is verse 12 kind of sets the scene as he's walking into the camp. And what does he see as he's walking into the camp? He's walking by the different people groups, right? The Midianites, the Amalekites, the people of the east. They're like locusts in their abundance. They're as far as the eye can see. Their camels. Their cavalry is without number. They are on a flat area with cavalry, right? That they have the huge advantage here. Their camels without number, as the sand is on the seashore in abundance. So he's walking past this, right? Walking through the outposts, and here he comes to this guy, these two guys, and the guys are talking about how they just had a prophetic dream that Gideon, specifically Gideon, is going to lead the peoples of God down here and crush them. All right. So how do you feel if you're Gideon now? After hearing this?
At least a little better.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, at least a little better, right? Like, okay, this is gonna be good. Even these pagan, non-Israelite people are getting signs that we're gonna win this. Okay, so let's see what happens next. So verses 15 through 18, I'll take those because it's short. As soon as Gideon heard the telling of the dream and its interpretation, he worshipped. And he returned to the camp of Israel and said, "Arise, for the Lord has given the host of Midian into your hand." And he divided the 300 men into 3 companies and put trumpets into the hands of all of them and empty jars, with torches inside the jars. And he said to them, "Look at me and do likewise. When I come to the outskirts of the camp, do as I do. When I blow the trumpet and all who are with me, then blow the trumpet also on every side of the camp and shout, 'For the Lord,' and for Gideon." Okay? So, he worships God in response to this. Goes back to the camp, has a plan. Now, what's interesting about this is Gideon's plan. And this is a good plan. This is actually a tactically sound plan, except for the dividing the forces part, which is not what you want to be doing when you're already dramatically undermanned. But why is this a good plan? What strengths is he playing to with this plan? Yeah, for sure, I'm real, dude. Yep. That too, Kessa. Anything else? Yeah. Very true, Winged. This still something that's part of Israeli army doctrine, by the way. Even if you're outnumbered, always go on the attack. Even if you're trying to defend, attack. um, because the enemy's not going to be expecting it. It's gonna run your way. Then it's still something that they like to do. But yeah, he's waging psychological warfare. So I think he adds his name to this because he heard that he's well known in the camp, and he's like, okay, we're going to use that because what does the guy say? He says that this is no other than the sword of Gideon, right? So he comes down here and he goes, okay, he says for the Lord and for Gideon, but then the people when the people actually attack, we'll see this in verse 20, they cry out a sword for the Lord and for Gideon. So he's referencing that dream. Yeah, great model. I'll take it. Exactly. Okay. You guys are also referencing some other things. So at night is a big thing. Nighttime really works against coalitions. So it's really tough before the age of flashlights and uniforms and night vision and communications to be able to tell at night who's on whose side. Night attacks are risky, and they get riskier the more people you have. You're much more likely to kill your own guys at night than during this time than you are to kill the enemy. So it's a smart play to attack at night because it's going to work against the enemy, especially since the enemy is a coalition. Coalitions are not going to be used to necessarily working together all the time. They're going to speak different languages. They're going to dress differently. They're going to have different customs and cultures. So when the attack happens, maybe the Midianites will say, they'll see someone that they don't necessarily recognize who's on their side, and be like, "Oh, bad guy," because we're in the that's not one of my guys, so I'm gonna attack them, right? So historically speaking, this is a good strategy because it plays to the strengths of his smaller, homogenous force. All of his guys are from the same area, right? The night works against the coalition. The numbers work against you at night. The timing being at night, but also being at the middle of the watch or the middle of the change of the first watch. We'll see change to middle watch. There we go. We'll see that in the next couple of verses. He attacks specifically when the watch is changing. So when one group is coming back from guard duty, is when he hits them. Which again for coalitions is going to really kind of encourage that them killing each other thing. So does this take away from God's glory if we say that this is actually a very smart plan and that Gideon has some military chops here? Yeah, I guess. Exactly. No, it does not, because this is still only 300 guys against a much, much larger force. Also, God specifically chose Gideon and called him a mighty warrior, right? So what's great about that is when we're introduced to Gideon, we don't see Gideon doing mighty warrior things. We see him doing cowardly, hiding, sneaking around things, right? Not confronting the problem, not instead saying, "Man, I wish God would take this problem away," as he tries to avoid it. God walks up to him and says, "Hey, I see you as a mighty warrior. I'm choosing you as a mighty warrior, and I'm going to use you as a mighty warrior." And God seeing something in Gideon that nobody else does, not even Gideon himself, has now led to this place where Gideon is courageous enough to walk back to camp and be like, "Hey, guys, we're going to go hit these guys, and here's a good strategy for doing so." So it shows that God is going to deliver the people of Israel here, but he's delivering them by making Gideon into something he wasn't. into legitimately making Gideon into a good commander here. So quite the opposite. It shows that God is able to take someone who nobody else thought of not as a good warrior, who didn't even think of himself as a good warrior, and make him into a good warrior, a good enough warrior to save his whole people. Okay. So, let's see how this plays out. Can I volunteer to read verses 19 through 25?
I can do it.
Go for it.
So Gideon and the 100 men who were with him came to the outskirts of the camp at the beginning of the middle of the watch, when they had just set the watch. And they blew the trumpets and smashed the jars that were in their hands. Then the 3 companies blew the trumpets and broke the jars. They held in their hands the torches, and in their right hands the trumpets to blow. They cried out, "A sword for the Lord and for Gideon." Every man stood in his place around the camp, and all the army ran. They cried out and fled. When they blew the 300 trumpets, the Lord set every man's sword against his comrade and against all of the army. And the army fled as far as Bethshita toward Zerah, as far as the border of Abel Mohala by Tobath. And the men of Israel were called out of Naphtali from the Asher and all of Manasseh, and they pursued after Midian. Gideon sent messengers throughout all of the hill country of Ephraim, saying, "Come down against the Midianites and capture the waters against them, as far as Bethbora and as also the Jordan." So all the men of Ephraim were also called out, and they captured the water as far as Bethbara and the Jordan. And they captured the 2 princes of Midian, Oreb and Zeb. They killed Oreb, and at the rock of Oreb and Zeb they killed the winepress of Zeb. They pursued Midian, and they brought the heads of Oreb and Zeb to Gideon across the Jordan.
Okay, thank you. So we see that this works brilliantly. They hit these guys right as they're changing watch, right in the middle of the night here. And the whole army routs. They start killing each other, and they rout, right? Confirmed best army size. And the 300 guys chase after him, right? And then Gideon puts out the I knew somebody was going to give a 300 reference. Good. Okay, so good. I didn't have to. Gideon puts out the call. The other Israelites, who some of them had gone back to their tents, come out and they start fighting after these guys. They cut them off on their way back east. And this works really, really well, right? Miraculously well. What's interesting is Gideon comes up with the plan. His guys execute the plan, but who's the one that turns that creates the chaos and makes this work well? The text lists somebody by name. Yeah, the Lord, exactly. So here's what's kind of interesting here is that Gideon sets the plan and God brings about the outcome. we kind of tend to think of that differently in the church, right? We kind of ask God for the plans, and then we'll go be responsible for the outcome. It's kind of how we tend to think of these things. But Proverbs in chapter 16, verse 9 says, "The heart of man plans his way, but the Lord establishes his steps." Okay. That's what we kind of see here. Gideon comes up with God says, "You're going to go do this." Gideon's afraid. God encourages him, "Hey, like, we're going to do this, right? Like, talked about this. Don't worry. I got this." Gideon is responsible for coming up with the plan, initiating the action, and then God brings about the outcome. So this is still God's victory, even though even though God used Gideon to come up with the plan. So God turns the people against each other. They rout. They get fleed. They get driven east. And where does the story kind of end here tonight? It doesn't end here, but where does this little chapter of the story end? It's an interesting little detail. They get chased towards the Jordan because they're getting chased back east. But where does Zeb get killed?
A rather interesting spot.
Yeah, the wine press of Zeb. So, likely named after the fact. But why is this significant? Where did we start last week? Yeah, we started at a wine press last week. So at the beginning of this little saga, Gideon was hiding from the Midianites in a wine press. At the end, he's climbing into the wine press to kill his enemy who's running and hiding from him. And that shows what's the difference. The difference is that God showed up and told Gideon, "You are a mighty warrior. I'm going to use you to deliver my people." The difference is that God showed up and God declared something about Gideon, something that Gideon didn't even believe about himself. God changed Gideon's identity, and that identity is what brings Gideon and Israel victory. As is very, it's not a coincidence that the wine press is included here at the end. This is meant to kind of bring us full circle. Now that's where we're going to leave Gideon tonight. And if this is a two-part drama, going back to what we started with last week, we can see why Lady Ongarth would think that would be like, yeah, Gideon's a good name for a kid, right? Like it, really positive, powerful warrior thing. Unfortunately, this is a three-part drama. This is where we end a lot of times with Gideon in the church. This is not where Gideon's story ends. So we'll talk more about that next week. But before we do, what do we gather from this? What can we take from this story this week, and what can we learn from it? Yeah, it's a huge encouragement. Don't lose your head. It's a huge encouragement. How so? Yeah, that's exactly it, Kessa. So we all have things that we think we can never be free of. And it's gonna look different for each one of us. For some of that's us, that's anxiety. For some of us, that's pornography addiction. For some of us, that's a relationship or a circumstance that we're in. Um, maybe it's a specific sin that we're struggling with. Maybe it's a financial situation. There's things that we think that we'll never be free of, that we're subservient to that thing. Maybe we're hiding in a wine press trying to avoid that problem, right? Instead of dealing with it. And yet, in each of our lives, God has shown up, right? He sent his son into our lives. And he's met us at a point of weakness. And what's God said about us? What titles has he given us? He has called us sons of God. He has called us, he said that he's given us his peace. He's given us his spirit. He's given us victory over sin. And I think that some of us, we're sitting in the wine press thinking, that's not true. How could that possibly be true? Right? It certainly doesn't feel that way. Well, it didn't feel that way for Gideon either. And yet, God took Gideon on a journey. First, he had to tear down some idols. He had to confront some people. He had to gather an army. And yet, by the end of this journey, Gideon is now climbing back into a wine press. But he's not climbing back in there to hide. He's climbing back in there to finish off this enemy that he was hiding from earlier. So Gideon's story has gone from victim to victor. And it wasn't an easy path. It's a path filled with doubt and filled with struggle and filled with bloodshed. I mean, Gideon's first thing that he had to obey God on, he had to take 10 guys with him because he was too scared to do it by himself. He's taking 10 guys to do a job of one guy at the beginning of the story. At the end of the story, he's taking 300 guys to do a job that should really be done by 300,000. Right? And yet he could do it because it's not about him. It's about God and what God has said about him. It's not about what Gideon says about himself. Not about what Gideon's people say about him. It's about what God says about him. And God has, I encourage you this week to look at the New Testament and see what God has said about us, the titles he's given us, the things that he said that he's given us through his spirit. And think of it in the terms of, this is like God going to Gideon and saying, hey, I see in you a mighty warrior. You're a mighty warrior. I'm going to use you. And I think that sometimes we're as unbelieving about these promises that God gives us as Gideon was about that promise. And yet, we can have the same sort of victory that Gideon has. So, that is the encouragement I'd like to leave you guys with this week. Sorry we didn't do a Christmas study. This will have to do. It just was not in the cards this week, with the chaos, at least in my life. But yeah, I think that this is still a good message to go into next week with the Christmas with, because the reason for Christmas is that God sending his son for Christmas is like God meeting Gideon in that wine press, right? He's meeting him. He met us in our weakest state, unable to save ourselves, and he's coming. He came to save us and to give us the power to work for his kingdom, just like he did for Gideon. Anything else on this, guys, before we close out with prayer requests? All right.